Let me take you back to the very beginning. The curtains open up and Act 1 begins. And from there, well, let's just dive into the music. Act 1, The Lake South, the River North by The Deer Hunter. So The Deer Hunter is about to release their 5th part of their 6th part concept album. That guy is getting released in September, and I thoroughly loved the 4th act, which was released last year. So I decided to go back and review each of the subsequent albums, starting right from the beginning of Act 1, and that's where we find ourselves today. So a little bit of background information about The Deer Hunter, because The Deer Hunter was actually a side project of the lead vocalist and guitarist of Casey Crescenzo, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He was a part of that post-hardcore band of the Receiving End of Sirens. Kind of putting himself completely into The Deer Hunter, he decided to really hunker down and try his hand at more of a progressive or more of a conceptualized number of discs. So coming up to the actual music found on here, this was a really great introduction to what The Deer Hunter presents. And I love how this album is opened up with just the vocals overlaid atop itself, almost like in a Queen style. With this vocals, there's also a repeating of words here with the flame is gone, the fire remains. And I love the fact that this is repeated, because within this type of a style, when this type of wording is repeated over and over again, it starts to shift and change meaning, and I love when this happens. The more he says the flame is gone, the fire remains, the more it starts to actually shift and sound like the flame is gone, the fire remains, as in like the fiery remains of something. So it's not necessarily like the flame is gone and the fire remains, but rather the flame is gone and this is what the fire remains are. And that is a great way to kind of open up the album, because now it's like, okay, so now the fire is gone and this is what has remained from that. So after that little bit of a prelude of, you know, the curtain slowly opening up and we're getting a little bit of a presentation here, we can see the stage and we have that, it's another almost prelude, you know, there's almost like an overture of such within the track of The Lake South. It feels almost like a creepy circus where nobody's really there. You know, the tents are up, there's a little bit of a gloom going on here, but nobody's really home. And so it really sets the stage for almost a creepy atmosphere, and I kind of like that. It's almost a macabre kind of a feeling as well, you know, almost like this lifeless, desolate place. And kind of countering that, coming right into the 3rd song of City Escape, this is a much more heartfelt and much more lively atmosphere. So the two are almost mirror images of the two songs. The two, you know, contrast but complement one another as well. And coming on to that kind of that same style of wording, once we get into the lyrics on that of please, where is the flame? You know, that's introspection that's going on within whoever's narrating this storyline. Especially when at the, you know, the beginning of the album where we have the flame is gone, the fire remains, and then right off the get-go we're like, well, where was that flame? Where is it gone? Like, what's going on here? It kind of keeps everything off kilter when the first thing that happens is you're questioning everything that's going on. And because everything leading up to this point so far has been very mellow and very atmospheric, the fact that this is now just an intensive power drive of music, it makes that much more impactful and much more oomph. You know, it's kind of like walking out of a theater, like a dark, dark theater, and coming into that blazing light. It takes you a second to kind of recalibrate yourself, and that questioning is very, you know, it's very fitting for that. And I love the fact that this song never really lets up either, and it's coming through all these different soundscapes as well. You're getting like those overlay of vocals again coming through. The main part that I love about this song is you're introduced to this very weird kind of almost haunting voices coming at you, where there's this like do 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 do, and it's going, especially in stereo, it's going all over the place, and it's really neat. But what I really like is the fact that later on we're presented again with this same theme and this same style of music, but instead of being that do 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 do, that very disconnecting, it's very flowy at that point. So now that we're used to it, we can enjoy it that much more in this second take.
Places, people, the stages set.
From From here, we go into The Inquiry of Mrs. Terry, and this is an interesting song, and it has that same kind of flavor as the last song from Hail to the Thief by Radiohead does. You know, it's got that almost a smooth jazz kind of a feel, and it makes me think of somebody walking down the street very, almost like strut-worthy, but not quite to that same extent. And I do like how this song does start off quite slow, but then builds to quite a punch kind of later on. It's met this really great kind of middle ground where you're not quite super hard, but you're not quite super soft. So the blending of these two styles within The Inquiry of Miss Terry, it's that same kind of style that Radiohead really employed, and I think they might have done it better here on the Deer Hunters album. And Casey's vocals on this album are just spectacular. He's really able to just belt it out, and you can feel every emotion that he's trying to elicit here. Getting that out, getting that across is sometimes really hard to do without going over the top, but I feel like his emotional drive here is so genuine that it comes off very, very pure and very well. And these four first songs are really the big highlight for me on this album. These four songs kind of knocked it right out of the park, and I was kind of hooked. Unfortunately, the next four songs don't quite reach that same level of sophistication, shall we say. They don't really take their time, and now that we're in the music, it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just not quite at that same peak that I felt like the first four songs had. And kind of leading us into the next four songs, we have 1878. And this song, it's a real slow burner, and I feel like it really doesn't go anywhere, unfortunately, because it is the longest song on this album at just over 7 minutes. And it does kind of have a really interesting keyboard or electric piano play near the end of the song that kind of rejuvenates the song a little bit, but because the song here really kind of hunkers down and really doesn't go too far. I mean, the songs that we've heard before this were really exploring the territory and really going over this itself. So it's surprising that the longest song on this album doesn't really do that. But coming from here, we have The Pimp and the Priest, and this is actually kind of a bouncy song, and I really like how this song is presented. It kind of takes what the Lake South did with utilizing more of that circus style of music, but this time there's more of a life in there. You know, we can see more of the bodies that are encompassing here. But oddly enough, those bodies are kind of soulless as well, so it still has that macabre feel going on there, where it's like this uncanny life and death thing going on, at least within the music. And it still utilizes that stuff that Mrs. Terry had. You know, it still kind of feels like that Radiohead song. Just that blending again takes place. And because it's kind of that call and answer, and we've had a little bit of time to digest it, now that we have it here in The Pimp and the Priest, it's sitting a little bit not quite well, and it's providing that something's off going on. So, I don't know, there was something really, really juicy about that song. And the ending of this song with those kind of like ba 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 da ba da, it reminds me of kind of like the Beatles or the Beach Boys by trying to put in some light on here, and it just makes it feel even more uncomfortable, which again I kind of loved. I loved where there was like that almost forceful trying to cheerfulness in this very gloomy atmosphere. That blending was very, very well done. And then we kind of come into almost that last song of His Hands Matched His Tongue. And on this track, it's much more soft and it's much more heartfelt and it's very subdued. So it's just the vocals and it's just the guitars on this one. And Casey is really showcasing his talent here because he's taking that step back now and he's kind of reflecting on what's going on within the story so far. Kind of ending on this song, I don't know, it reminds me of almost like Blackbird from the Beatles. Because everything kind of being presented so far on this album didn't quite feel natural, this one feels very, very natural. It feels very heartfelt. Ending the song on that very optimistic and very high note, it closed the curtains a little bit, ending Act 1 very well. which then we are ushered into The River North. If His Hands Match the Tongue were the closing track, this one's when the credits are rolling to really kind of say, yep, this is it. The house lights are coming on in the theater, and you can almost hear that backing track of that tape coming to an end. All it is a simple piano kind of overdubbed and sounding like a recording, which is weird. I mean, if you think about it, the ending of this album, the final ending, we hear the orchestra kind of get up and leave, even though we haven't heard the orchestra for 3 songs from now. So were they just kind of sitting there waiting for everything to take place? Or perhaps they were reflecting on what Casey was presenting from His Hands Matched His Tongue and The River North. And so they're just kind of sitting there and reflecting on what's happened, which kind of makes those last 2 songs resonate a lot more with me, because I'm not the only one listening now. Now we have the players kind of sitting back on what's being presented and also reflecting with me. So that provided a much more deeper analysis for this album, and one that I kind of enjoyed even more. So rounding this all up, I thoroughly enjoyed diving into this album and coming back to it time and time again. Even though I felt like the first half of this album was a little bit more stronger than the second half, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. Those final 2 tracks definitely hit it home. I mean, really, the only kind of downer song on this was 1878, which is a little bit of a shame because that's kind of the centerpiece on this album as well. But that being said, it was still a fantastic album and one that I suggest checking out. I'd have to say, definitely download this album and listen to it on headphones. This album deserves to be in your discography on your computer or on the go, so definitely download it and enjoy. And that's about it. So what did you guys think of Act 1? The Lake South, The River North by the Deer Hunter. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting below. And stay tuned, because in the next 2 months, I will be uploading my thoughts on Act 2 and Act 3. And I am very excited to dive into those, guys. So definitely look forward to those. Thank you guys so much for watching. It was a real treat diving into these albums. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.